I'm basically a behavioral scientist, a customer-centricity expert, a three-time published author, a contributor to many publications, including the World Economic Forum and Harvard Business Review, and a TEDx speaker and a TEDx speaker coach. But there's other cognitive biases that we're not as conscious about, such as there's one called Maslow's hammer, where you kind of default to one tool being the solution for all problems. So in companies, sometimes that can be things like surveys or studies. They say, well, we'll do a study, that'll give us the answer, and then we can move on. When maybe that challenge, that situation requires a different tool.
What is one missed opportunity that you wish you had a second chance at?
I wanted to learn fencing.
Hello, fellows. Welcome to the next episode of Jagged with Jasravi. Subscribe to my channel for conversations at the edge with thought leaders from the marketing, branding, and the business world. Conversations that ignite new ideas with rough and sharp edges. Hello, Andrea. So nice to have you on my show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Andrea, I will now request you to tweet your profile. If you had to tweet your profile, what would you say?
I would say that I'm basically a behavioral scientist, a customer-centricity expert, a three-time published author, a contributor to many publications, including the World Economic Forum and Harvard Business Review, and a TEDx speaker and a TEDx speaker coach.
Awesome. Oh my God, this is intimidating, but so good for my audience. Okay. I have listened to your TED Talk and Andrea, you explain the point so beautifully with such nice, familiar analogies, because people don't apply even if they understand, when it comes to consumer understanding, when it comes to why is important, when it comes to so many aspects of understanding the consumer, either it's not done or it remains at the surface. Mm-hmm. So we have an expert. Let's get our facts right. Let's get some tips about how to go about it. I am going to start from data, information, and knowledge. How are these different?
Well, we tend to get these three concepts convoluted, and they tend to be mushed together into one idea of data is information is knowledge. And that isn't actually totally accurate. So data is really a fundamental collection of facts. So let's say that's information you can put in a spreadsheet, or it's something that you can collect after talking to multiple people. And these things are really not valuable without a context. And that's what changes data to information. So for example, if I give you the number 12012021, that's data. It doesn't mean anything. But if I put it in the context of a date, then you understand that that's December 1st, 2021. So that's why when we look at data alone without context, it's not really anything but numbers oftentimes. It becomes information when you give that data a context. Now, if we want that data to become information, and we want that information to become knowledge, we need to give it meaning. So if information is given some meaning, some bigger purpose, or some direction, then you can glean something bigger from that, which is knowledge that you can leverage to make better decisions.
And Andrea, now I'm adding another concept here. Where does insight fit in, and why is it important? So you have data, you have a context, so you know how to read it. So it's become information. Now you're interpreting it. It has a purpose in terms of how it will be applied, perhaps, and it's becoming knowledge as well. Where does insight fit in, and why is that important?
So insight is that nugget, that little thing that comes out of knowledge that you see that no one else does. It's something that you glean from knowledge after you collect a lot of data and a lot of information and process that as knowledge, as you learn. And as you learn things, you glean insights. We've all do this after reading a series of business books or going to college or school or working with people in a specific environment. So that insight is the key to unlocking something different. It's about looking at that knowledge and not taking it at face value, but trying to find insights within it by looking at it in different ways that other people aren't.
Yeah, that's an aha moment. That's a perspective. That kind of connects dots, and so that's, you got an insight into something. Yeah. So, Andrea, in your experience in consulting clients, or otherwise, even when you're doing your research, where is it do you see that the clients have the utmost challenge in gathering or applying data, information, insight when it comes to taking decisions that will impact consumer? Slightly convoluted, maybe I made it, but whether it comes to marketing or innovation or any of those decisions that will impact the consumer, where do you think the biggest challenge or misunderstanding is there?
Yeah, I think that there are a few parts to that. And one is that we take data and try to draw conclusions from that data without looking at context, without trying to gain knowledge, and without trying to find insights. We look at data, the data is presented, we draw a conclusion without digging deeper. And that really limits our ability to discover things for customers that no one else has. Every company has the majority of the same knowledge. They understand how their business operates, they know their financials, they know generally who their customers are, and they know what their competitors are doing. Every company is looking at the same sets of data. The difference is, how can you go from data to insight? And that's usually the gap. That gap exists because most organizations are looking internally. They're looking at themselves, what they want to do, what their competitors are doing, and not taking the time to really understand their customers on a deeper level, beyond this data, beyond these numbers, beyond this content. They need to spend more time actually interacting with humans and understanding their customers' context, understanding their customers' circumstances and catalysts for behavior. So that's kind of the second piece, is that they're not doing that. But I believe that the third piece, and most commonly seen, is that there is a fear of change. There's a fear of actually doing something that doesn't have a guaranteed outcome. So, for example, with one of our clients, they know that if they hire more salespeople, they will have more sales. And this is a very simple and easy equation to understand. But when you're looking at differentiating yourself from another company to grow exponentially, you need something that's different than what every other competitor is doing. You need to have something that goes beyond just hiring more salespeople. How can you do that or approach that in a way that is different, that's driven by what customers are looking for rather than what your internal needs are?
So this is very, very powerful that you said, Andrea, that the fear of change, because that understanding can come with a lot of empathy, because typically when the client is not investing time or money for consumer understanding, the first response is that, oh, it's arrogance. They think they know everything and not much has changed. And, like this is covered, like we have this campaign and then this campaign, and, there's not much. We did a U&A 10 years back, and, how much would have changed, right? This is for FMCG category, right? But this fear of change is a very deep insight, because the findings will have lots of implications, and what will we do with it, and will we have to change more than we are comfortable with, is a great insight, Andrea. Thank you for that. So now, one is that, okay, you do consumer research. One is that, okay, you are getting data from all the social media and digital campaigns that you're doing. So you're getting that digital data. And even then, insights are not happening, or that investment is not happening. What is there a third way that orientation, that culture can happen within to keep consumer at the center of decision making?
That's a big question. The short answer is yes. There's many ways, and the first thing really is to think about your organizational culture and behavior. Because if you are talking about internally, if your organization speaks about yourself all the time, your own performance, your own numbers, and not about potential problems to be solved with customers, or having only a certain select number of people in the organization engaging with customers in any way, whether that's only sales or only marketing, you're cutting off the ability of the organization to truly understand and behave in a way that serves customers. So that siloing effect, that cloistered protection from the customer, limits the ability of the organization and the culture to understand customer needs and react to them. So the culture and behavior go hand in hand. The second piece is that when we look at customer data, there are multiple types of customer data. And we're not talking about whether it comes from this medium or that medium, but the type of information that can be gleaned to develop insights. So there's three types. And the first is what you referred to, which is what we call about customer information, or information about customers, which is everything they do. You said social media, online transactions, purchase history. These are the things that are easy to capture, that we can understand what they do and through transactions. But this is just what they're doing today. Then there's insight from customers, which is information that is feedback from when a customer uses a product. So we've seen this many times over, where, let's say, someone is using an Excel spreadsheet, and a company is observing them and asking them questions, and they see them using sticky notes. You can see this behavior. They're using the product, but they're using this supplemental tool of the sticky notes to kind of fill a gap that maybe the product isn't filling. So that's something that you can glean from customers, or sometimes they provide that information through social media. I use this product to solve this problem, even if it was originally designed to solve another problem. But then insight really comes from information for customers. And that's about digging in and identifying their needs and challenges through their context, through their bigger picture needs and behaviors in a broader sense, which really brings me to the process that we developed, which is called the W Ideation process. And it's just a way to help shape an organization's thinking and behavior around the customer, rather than just saying we need to be customer-centric, let's get customer feedback and figure out what we want to do with it. It's about changing the way we perceive customers and utilizing them as a resource for innovation. So the process has three parts, and it starts with what we call the query, which is really a why statement that helps set the stage for what you're going to explore. So the why statement includes basically a target audience and an offering that you already have on the market. So let's say it's something as simple as, why would millennials, that's your target audience, want or need, let's say, a mortgage, right? Something that most people need. In this case would be a financial services example. Now, the second part of the process is to examine the what, right? The context around that why. And that's not just something functional like, well, they need a mortgage to buy a house. We all know that that's the case. But what are the catalysts and contexts for that need or interest to occur? So that could be something like they had a baby, they got a promotion, they just moved to town. These are kind of bigger picture things that help you understand the true why behind that need. And then you need to dig into those tactical things, those other what's that would be supportive of that context. So let's say if someone, a millennial, needed or wanted a mortgage because they just had a baby, what other things could your organization provide, whether it's products, services, third-party services, free offerings, whatever it may be, that could help them in that journey, in that context. And then you take all those ideas and you narrow that down to what we call a wow hypothesis or wow statement. And the intent of that is to develop a thesis, right? You pick one of those why contexts, you pick a few of those what's, and then you say, okay, what we're going to explore is, and in this scenario, the opportunity of a potential customer, a millennial that wants a mortgage, that has a baby. And we think what we could do is offer services around, let's say, baby supplies or child care, because you go through that mortgage process. It's very long and lengthy. Maybe there's things like that. And of course, this is just a hypothetical example to support them in a bigger way, right? And those are things that your competitors aren't thinking about. They aren't talking about. They're only talking about, how do we make the mortgage process simpler or more efficient or easier? So you will end up trying to, outcompete your competition without considering the unmet needs of the potential or existing customers.
Wow. So isn't that brilliant? Because one, it's a simple process, yet it takes you so deep into the consumer's life, and you're looking at your consumer as an individual, as a human being, which is the beauty of this. You're looking at not just someone who's going to buy my product, but as a person who has a life. So what are going to be the enablers? And you have scenarios to customize your product with value addition, which is going to differentiate you and build a great relationship as well. So amazing. It's like, sometimes there's such a lot of consumer research digs and throws so many things, but here is like, it's a pointed framework with stuff that is ready to apply. So that's an ideation process that we can start with, and it will also perhaps, Andrea, reveal what we don't know and where we need to get more information or data point, right?
Exactly. It's not a process where you have the answer at the end. You have a series of ideas to explore based on customer needs. And so then you can determine whether this idea is something your organization can execute. It makes sense from a resource and financial perspective. You can examine whether that's something that there is a large need for. So, for example, with having a baby, maybe your target audience are older, and having a baby doesn't apply, right? Mm-hmm. So it all depends on what you discover in that discussion, and then you take that idea that everyone feels has the most merit, and you go out and engage with your existing and potential customers about that idea. So it helps narrow down all the ideas that come from different perspectives into a single hypothesis that then you can validate and then explore from an implementation perspective later.
And that validation, I mean, that also one part could be with customer, like you said, like you can have a concept and you can check out. So you talked about not one perspective, and I love this when you say that how to ensure multiple perspectives, because the very idea of knowing completely holistically your consumer can get defeated if you just quickly form hypotheses from whatever you know and kind of get into decisions. So how can an organization ensure that all possibilities, all perspectives are taken into account for understanding the customer holistically?
Well, it starts with bringing a lot of different people to the table. So in these type of ideation sessions, you should not just have upper management. You should not just have one demographic of people. And ideally, if you have people in your organization that represent the customer, that are of that audience, that's even more valuable. But the critical part is that you don't cut off any idea. You collect all those ideas, but then you sort that down into what makes the most business sense, and then use customer input to validate it. So it's not an idea that comes from upper management and that trickles down. It's not something that comes from, let's say, frontline customer service folks, and it's a tactical change that moves up. It's something that is strategic for the organization. And that's the intent, is to develop new ideas that are based around a strategy of differentiation. And that's what really customer centricity is all about, is standing out and being different in a way that is most valuable and resonates most deeply with your target audience.
Yeah, so beautifully said. Andrea, you've talked about ideation, and I now want you to really say it here, which I've heard you say, is how organizations can benefit from having a system or a process that is a regular interface with customers, like everybody, not just the research department affiliated with the marketing department, but everybody is mandated to meet customers at a regular periodicity or intensity, because I've seen that it's so easy to forget the customer's reality. Even if you've done the research and you're supposed to be the representative, because so much talk in an organization is around me-centered product, is me-centered campaign. I mean, either side, whether your agency or your client. And I've seen Unilever used to have that, Andrea, years back, where they used to call it soapboxes. There was a regular system, and you had to have a certificate of how many hours you've spent with the customer, and you had to ensure those many hours. So even if it gets taken for granted that, everybody knows why this product is used and, the existing motivations, but still just the fact that, you're not the only one. You're the researcher or the CMI person or the marketing person is not the only one representing the consumer,
Right. And that goes back to your point on multiple perspectives. Yeah. So people with different roles from different backgrounds, can bring a new perspective from customer feedback that maybe one or two other individuals could not. And that's why it's important not to outsource customer research. There's a reason for that. And the first reason is that you aren't seeing those nuances yourself. You're getting filtered information from a researcher in a summary document that tells you likely nothing different than they're sharing with competitors who hire them for the same thing. So it's hard to glean a lot of insight from only data and information, right? So we talked about that and changing that information into knowledge. And that happens when you go out and engage with people, which is the second part of ensuring everyone in your organization consistently engages with customers and that they're having conversations, they're bringing that information back to the organization. That is knowledge that insights can be gleaned from. So because let's say you had an audience where they're all female, but your executive team is all male. And so to give, let's say, the executive team the responsibility of getting potential customer feedback, is that the right audience to match with it? They'll have one viewpoint that, let's say, a female would have a very different viewpoint. They both might be very valid, but they're going to be very different. And so that's why using diverse people to engage with customers kind of triangulates that information so you can actually develop knowledge out of it.
People are doing workshops and the consumer part just becomes one presentation. And then it's like, okay, let's get to, the business. I mean, that was as much part of the business, but it just becomes one presentation. But if you don't have a process, how will it happen? So it needs to be mandated and made it into a regular process. So that brings us to another very important point that you talk about, Andrea, is emotion and data, logic and feelings. So in that territory, again, how data in itself is not going to tell you much. How customers feel about something is what you have to get to. How would you say this? How would you share this? Yeah.
The thing that we tend to forget is we think data is infallible. And so it is the answer, the factual answer to everything. When, as we know, data can be misinterpreted, data can be inaccurate, and also you can draw many conclusions from data. Now, humans are different than data. Humans actually make decisions based on emotion the majority of the time, 80-90% of the time, given the circumstances. So think about when you had to make a decision and you were sad or you were running late or you were hungry, right? Emotion was driving that decision. You weren't using logic in every scenario from beginning to end to make a decision. Let's say you were buying a breakfast food. You might be swayed by the branding or marketing, or you might be in a hurry, as I mentioned, so you pick up something that's easier to eat and travel with rather than something healthier that would be more logical. So though we think that logic drives customers' decisions, it isn't really that way all of the time or the majority of the time. So we look at data, and usually it's historical data, behavioral data, or as we said, about customer data. And we look at transactions, we look at their purchase history, and try to make predictions on their behavior. And the problem is that, again, emotion is involved. And even customers, if you ask them, would you buy this or would you consider doing this? They'll tell you most of the time what you want to hear because they cannot predict their future behaviors either. So when we try to use data to predict future behaviors, it often doesn't help It's not very useful in that context. The other challenge with data is that we often think that the data draws correlations that really maybe are untrue. And an example in the book I talk about is a study where they measured the number of shark attacks and the amount of ice cream sales in the same time period in the United States, and found that both of the trends matched each other. And the problem was, as you'd say, well, of course, ice cream has nothing to do with shark attacks. But if you looked at the data without a context, without a deeper meaning, you might draw that conclusion. And the only correlation there was that it was in the summertime, that most people in the United States buy ice cream in the summertime, and that most shark attacks are also occurring in the summertime. But they don't relate at all in any way. So when we look at customer behavior and past purchase history or past behaviors that they had in the past, that does not mean that their future behavior will be different, or that that predicts in any way what they might do, because there might not be a correlation there.
So, like you're saying, the cognitive biases are at work, and hence the brain is always taking a shortcut basis the context, what factors will be evaluated, and what will be the hierarchy of those parameters. It will vary. So you have to get it in context of why the consumer is taking a certain decision.
Exactly. We normally, outside of emotion, we don't want to take a lot of mental energy to make decisions. So we usually use these shortcuts. These cognitive biases are often called heuristics, where we just default to the easiest thing. So that can be a bias, as we referred to earlier, about status quo. I don't want to change, right? It's easier to keep something the same rather than think about a change, what it impacts, what you have to do to enact the change, and so forth. But there's other cognitive biases that we're not as conscious about, such as there's one called Maslow's hammer, where you kind of default to one tool being the solution for all problems. So in companies, sometimes that can be things like surveys or studies. They say, well, we'll do a study that'll give us the answer, and then we can move on, when maybe that challenge, that situation requires a different tool. Or another one that I find very interesting is called Bikeshedding. And this has to do with a hypothetical scenario where there was an executive team that had to make two decisions. And one was about approving a nuclear power plant blueprint. And the other one that was about the company bicycle shed and what color it should be. Right? A very complicated decision and an easy decision. And the group actually spent very, very little time on the complicated decision and an exponentially larger amount of time on the easy decision, which was the color of the bike shed. Because complicated things, especially, collectively in a group, but also individually, take a lot more cognitive brain power to process. So it's easy to debate and discuss and, take a lot of time with simple decisions because they're easier to digest. So these shortcuts we do sometimes thwart our best decisions, and emotion thwarts our best decisions as consumers. So as businesses, we need to consider these, kind of human, behavioral economics, behavioral science concepts, instead of solely looking at data and past behaviors and believing customers will just do more of the same.
Wow. This is like every time I hear a cognitive bias, I feel like really starting an introspection within me because I myself don't know when I'm doing it. And I'm sure all human beings, and that's the beauty and power of it, that universally a human being is oriented to do it unconsciously. Isn't that amazing?
You don't think about it until someone talks about it, and then you realize it's happening.
So, Andrea, now, so towards the end, I'd request you to, like say three things. If there are three things that an organization must do to be customer centric, and of course, it's going to benefit them at every stage, because I mean, everything is about making something for the consumer. But before that, there is so there are two areas. One that I personally want to know is understanding culture. So a huge semiotic decoding or a huge, ethnographies. Most organizations don't want to allocate that much time. And I'm just one, and you have to do it every time you're understanding a category. You have to get it in context of the culture, because you're borrowing from it even for communication, right? For branding, and even in social media. And of course, now today they're saying brands are creating culture as well. Like brands are creating shared beliefs, etc. But is there a framework? Is there a quicker way, some signifiers that you can get, and you can at least know that, yeah, I've not gone deep, but at least I am taking it into account, that unsaid, that stuff that is below what we see of the iceberg, that is the collective consciousness. Is there a way that we keep a tab on it as we go about understanding consumers?
That is a big challenge. And I think that when we try to think of consumers as global consumers, that it's too simplified, that every culture and microculture has its nuances we need to understand. I've done a lot of world travel. I've gone to 12, 13, 14 different countries over my career. And the one thing I realized in working for a US company is the US in this scenario, the US thought they understood the other countries and their cultures. And so they pushed their US perspective onto them, when there were things that was very relevant at a ground level to that country and that city and that business, that the US as a culture would not understand unless you were there. So, for example, there was a case where it was a manufacturing company in the US. There's a lot of safety requirements and hard hats and things. In this other country, they tried to enact those safety requirements, and it was something that was not common to that culture, that the people in the plant actually did not wear shoes, and they would not wear shoes on a regular basis during their regular day, much less at the plant. And so it's a different thing to look at in the sense of, what does that culture or that audience actually hold important, and what is the drivers for their behavior? It doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter where you're from. And so the easiest way to do that is to involve people from that audience segment in these discussions and ideas, right? I can't say that I know what it's like to be person A, person B, person C. I can only look at things through my own lens. And I can only gain knowledge by hearing those perspectives and having a conversation. But that audience has to bring that insight, that information to the table for other people to understand effectively.
That's the most authentic way you can have the hat and the shoes of that culture, rather than yourself trying to get into a version of it. You get them to talk about it, to share their experiences in the movies, in the context where one is trying to understand. Yeah, you're right. When when we want the translation, we get the person of that state, because often you don't know certain terms can be misinterpreted or they don't convey the right essence. So, Andrea, there are you've also talked about NPS and its limitations. Could you share with our audiences why it's not the perfect score it's been made out to, and how else one can understand this whole phenomenon?
Net Promoter Score, NPS, is one of those things that is easy for companies to do. And it's easy for them to feel like they're doing something that has value, that can be used in a board report or a corporate statement that shows that they're tracking something important and they're measuring it. The problem with Net Promoter Scores is that it's just a number. So, for example, Net Promoter Scores, as you know, has kind of the 1 through 6, which is considered a detractor. I think 7 and 8 is more neutral, and then 9 and 10 is an advocate, if you will. And there's been multiple studies finding that actually people who are not, and this goes back to our previous discussion, if they are only rationally satisfied with your company, meaning you provide the services efficiently, at a fair price, effectively, that they could give you a 9 or a 10. The people that are emotionally satisfied are actually much more loyal to the company. And so if you are just simply rationally satisfied, that 9 or 10 has no meaning. So that is a big difference. The second piece is that actually that information, that average score of let's say a 7 or an 8, doesn't tell you the why. You can survey all of your customers every quarter, every month. You see this number go up and down slightly. But if that went from a 9 to a 2, you need to have some insight as to why. And the Net Promoter Score does not provide any path, tool, or mechanism to figure out that why. Then you become this very reactionary organization where suddenly everyone's disappointed, all your customers are unhappy, and you need to discover why. When really that number isn't something that will trend up or down significantly unless there's a catastrophe. So if you aren't engaging with customers on a daily basis, this number might give you some, okay, they're not very mad, they feel okay. But the problem is that if you were engaging with customers all the time, you wouldn't need that number. You would already know how they feel and how they feel about the organization with information that you could use to create new products, services, and differentiators.
It could be like blinkers on and you won't even know why
Right.
People are moving on and you're happy, like I got a 10, and then you're like, okay, it means nothing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Andrea, and I was talking to Drew Nizer, who's written this book. If your aim is to satisfy customers, you're aiming for mediocrity.
Right.
You need to be obsessed with your consumer. I mean, that's just ways of saying that, you got to continuously know them and how they feel. And then only, if you're doing enough to retain them or making them a fan or a true advocate, like the 10 is supposed to indicate.
Yes.
Awesome. How do you handhold the client to get into this culture of consumer experiential immersive understanding? What should be the first steps?
It really starts with, and this is the thing that many consultants or businesses that are trying to help other businesses overlook. The company that you're trying to help has to have at least one big problem that they know is a big problem and have not been able to solve it. And it is urgent to solve. There are many companies out there that could be better, that could be making more money, they could be running more efficiently, but they are complacent. They have no catalyst for change. They have no need to change, right? So think about yourself personally, whether it's you're going about your day, you know you could be eating better, you know you could be more fit, you know you could be doing more volunteer work in the community, right? Things like that. But you don't. Your day is fine, and your days and days and days go by. You have no catalyst for change. But then you have, let's say, a heart attack, and you come out of the hospital, and now you have this urgent, driven need for change because of this event. So you can't help every organization. And organizations, like people, they don't really want to be helped if they don't feel they need it, even though they may need it. You have to find those potential customers that have a urgent need for change. They want to change, and they just don't know how. Because the other clients that are out there that have needs, they will only then tell you what they want. They will say, I want a campaign. I want to hire more salespeople. I want to have a training for my staff on leadership. These things don't do anything unless you really understand what the problem is you're solving. Those activities are just activities to make someone feel like something is happening, but it doesn't mean it's actually doing anything valuable or productive to grow the company, make it more efficient, or make it more effective.
So if you want me not to shoot, you keep shooting. This is rapid fire. Quick questions, quick answers. Okay. Mother's best advice.
Be practical.
Alternate profession could have been.
Forensic scientist.
As per your best friend, your most often used phrase.
I say, stop and think.
One thing no one knows about you.
I think there's a lot of people that don't know about me because I keep things very private.
A book you'd like to gift to all your friends and it can't be your own.
The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel.
Check it out, audiences. Okay, what's something new happening in your life right now?
I will be putting in a parking space in my driveway. Another one.
Okay, what would you tell your 18-year-old self?
Don't worry about it. Relax.
Okay, what's your favorite childhood memory?
Hunting for, doing a Easter basket hunt that my mother made with quiz questions. You have to answer the question to get to the next place to then find a basket. It was very challenging.
Oh, amazing. And smart mom. Okay. If you were to devote the rest of your life to philanthropy, what cause would you choose?
I think it would go back to something with animals, ASPCA, or anything to help animals, domestic animals in bad conditions.
Okay. Okay. What is your greatest joy?
Doing nothing. Just doing nothing.
Yeah.
It's a luxury.
How would you like strangers to remember you?
As approachable and caring about them.
What's a lesson that took you a long time to learn?
Don't overthink it. I'm still working on that.
What is one missed opportunity that you wish you had a second chance at?
I wanted to learn fencing.
Oh, okay. I see you doing it, Andrea.
Good,
Yeah,
baby.
yeah. Okay, what's next?
Maybe book number 2.
Hmm. Hmm. It's the start. It
Yes.
started. The process has started. Yay. Only on Jagged with Just Ravi. Amazing. Okay, it's a wrap up. Andrea, I'd request you to share any online addresses where anybody can reach out to you, engage with you.
Yes, you can find me on Twitter. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find our company website at pragmadik.com. That's pragmadik.com. Or my speaking and content website, which is andreabelkolson.com, AndreaBelkolson.com. Of course, you can find my articles and work throughout many publications. And of course, everyone needs to subscribe, like, share this podcast. This has been amazing, super fun experience. It is incredible to answer questions with a gun pointed at you, but it makes you think very, very quickly.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Andrea. It's been lovely to host you. And, with Jagged with Just Ravi, and my audiences wish you super luck with your book, What to Ask, and the second book, the seed of which has been planted here.